Hi Anand, how are you?
Hi, Sonia. I'm good. Thank you. How are you doing?
Very well, very well. So I'll start with introducing you once to our viewers, to those who don't know you. So everybody, Anand Vishwanath is the founder and CEO of Anvis Pet Relocation Services and Anvis Inc. And as a pet relocation specialist, he's traveled to over 22 countries across 5 continents, and you've covered what, over 150 cities,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And you've
yeah.
relocated close to 3,000 pets already.
Right, right.
And the cities are not only restricted to mainstream cities like London and Chicago and Mexico, Paris, and New York, but also Colombo, Gabon, Fukuwaka, and the kinds, right?
Absolutely. Just been blessed
All
that got opportunities to go to such places.
absolutely. So it's a pleasure to have you over. And hi, I'm Ridul. So without taking too much time or the limelight anymore, over to you. We'll start with, of course, today the topic that we're discussing is relocation of pets to the US from India, US and Canada. So please, you can start and tell us what are the things to be kept in mind when we're relocating.
Right. So, yeah. Now, I think the reason why we were talking about US and Canada is we get a lot of people who are moving to US Canada from India for whatever reason, right? It could be studies, it could be work, relocating for good, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? And we have seen in the past 10 years that we have been doing relocation. I think that is one of the most sought after countries. Perhaps followed by European countries and then maybe Australia. So I think that is one of the reasons why we said, okay, we will probably try and address some basic issues, because some certain things that can be kept in mind before a pet parent starts, right? Even if they start to think about, let's start to relocate my dog or a cat, right?
Hmm.
What are the basic things that to be kept, rather than coming close to date and then trying to figure out, okay, this was done, this was not done, and then you're in a hurry. People are also moving, they're also moving, right? And you don't want to
Yeah.
put the pet at any kind of a risk, right? So I think one of the first things that I always tell people, when they start to relocate is please prepare well ahead in time, right? At least give yourselves bare minimum, like, and specific to US, Canada, I will say bare minimum, give yourselves about 4 months. Start the process about 4 months before. Why 4 months? Why not, closer? One of the main things in any relocation would typically be getting your pet used to the crate, right? A travel crate.
Right.
A pet
Right.
needs a travel crate to go in. I will let it be a cat or a dog, and we'll touch upon whether it is how the pet will fly, in some point in time.
Yeah.
But anyway, they have to have a travel crate, and getting the pet used to the travel crate is one of the most critical things that we want to start off. And if you have
Mhm.
time on hand, I think it is more important that you give your dog or cat that much time to get acclimatized to the crate, rather than expecting, put the dog or cat into the crate and then say, okay, chal, now we have to move.
Travel.
We close the door, because then that becomes a area that they want to come out of. They want to escape out of that place, and then the stress goes up. There's so many other things people are picking up. They are seeing different sight sounds, etc., etc., and it just puts a lot of stress, right? And I believe there are some statistics. There are some this one that says that if a dog or a cat is trained to the crate, it brings down the stress levels on them for like almost about 50%, right? So we have seen this
Hmm.
personally. We have seen when dogs or cats get used to the crate before they travel, they're a lot more comfortable. They're sitting in the crate, they're relaxing in the crate, right? And they're watching around what's happening, because they know that that's their comfort zone. That's a little home that's traveling with them.
Right.
So that's one of the most important things that I would say is, if and you have to give yourself that time, right? And we have seen that it takes at least about 2 to 3 months for a dog to get used to a crate, comfortably, such that the dog is sleeping in the crate through the nights.
Hmm.
Cats will take a little bit lesser time, because they already almost get you. They
Usually.
like, yeah, small spaces and that kind of a thing, right? But give it that time. Don't want to see all other things. We can still fast track and do that, but you can't expect a dog or a cat to understand that, hey, we are traveling next month, and you get used to your crate, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the primary reason I say start off early is the crate. Second is, of course, it gives you time to plan the other things, right? Your documentation, your vaccination has been done, whatever needs to be done, and probably we'll touch upon that maybe
We'll
little by
cover
little
those.
on whatever the things are. Just gives you time to sort of plan it. So I think point number one for me, the biggest is please, please plan ahead. Don't keep it as a last minute, because relocation is not something that happens overnight, right? You're thinking about it, you're applying and you're doing things. Start early.
Great. Yeah, and especially since we also start preparing ourselves for it, right? Like a couple of months before we have to relocate. And yeah, like you rightly said, at least
Absolutely.
for the crate, it's definitely something that dogs will need some time to adapt to. Okay, we have a
Absolutely.
lot of people
Absolutely.
saying hello and hi to us, you.
Hello. Hello.
Hi
Hi, guys.
Angelina, hi Sandeep, hi Jyoti, hi Saloni, hi Ranjeet, and hi Manish. Wow. Okay, great. So, and also, what are, so again, coming back to, or rather going to the US or Canada, what are the kind of health requirements that are like a mandate or something for pets to have when they're moving?
See, I think US, Canada was, okay, I'll be specific to US. I think US was one of the, and I say was, one of the easier countries to move into till 2 days back. And I kid you not, just 2 days back, that's like on the 16th, we got a notification
This
saying that,
article,
yeah, that US there is a temporary suspension for
ban
dogs,
on
not for
pets. Yeah,
cats.
for dogs.
Yeah, for dogs going into US from what they are terming as high rabies risk countries.
Hi, rabies. Yeah.
Yeah. So prior to that, it was actually fairly simple, straightforward. You have your rabies, you have your DHLPP. Of course, you have your microchip, rabies, DHLPP, right? Your deworming spot-on treatment, right? The main thing that we anyway have for our pet, and that was all that was required. And we needed to get a health certificate issued by the AQCS. However, this really is going to be a challenging thing. So now we are also trying to figure out what is it, right? We're trying to learn the nitty gritties of what is it that they really want, because they are saying that this temporary suspension, although it is there is a way that you can import, but you need to have an import permit, and there are certain regulations that are
Okay.
associated with. So and we are still trying to figure out what those are. However, as far as Canada is concerned, it's simple, right? So we need to get a microchip done. We need to have your normal vaccination, which is your rabies vaccination. Then you have your DHLPPI for your dogs. You have your
Hmm.
FRCP for your cats.
Hmm.
I personally prefer any pets to have your deworming treatment done completely,
Done.
and also you want to have your spot on treatment for ticks and fleas. That is mostly for the protection of your own pet,
Yeah.
right? Some of these things, like for example, Canada will really does not say that we need a microchip for the cats, but
Okay.
we definitely say that you need to have the microchip, because India will require microchips for any pet that is exporting, because it will come in your health certificate, right?
Okay.
So we definitely want to have microchip vaccinations, that is your rabies, followed DHLPP, FRCP, and then the rest of these.
Right. Okay. And so, taking forward what you were just talking about, what exactly is a microchip and why is it mandatory?
See, microchip is it's actually a small. It's the size of a little rice grain, right?
Okay.
And which gets implanted. Yeah, it's a very small thing, and it gets implanted in the nape of the neck of a cat or a dog, where we
Okay.
have the loose skin where
Above.
you put your collar. Yeah. So mostly the vets will just lift the skin up and then they will implant it. It doesn't
Okay.
require the dog to be under. All right. So sometimes some of the vets will give the pets a local anesthesia, because the needle is slightly bigger, not like a normal
Okay.
needle. It's slightly bigger, and then
Okay.
it goes in. Now, why is a microchip really important? Microchip
Hmm.
is it's an identification. See, we know our pets as whatever, right? Lucy and Rambo and whatever, and we identify by the breed and the color and all that.
Yeah.
But for government regulations for airlines and all that, they don't know that, and it is interchangeable. That there could be many Lucy's that could be traveling at any particular point in time, right? There could
Right.
be many Lucy Labradors that could be traveling at any particular point in time. So, what
Mm.
is that one non-tamper proof thing that remains with an animal? Which is your microchip, right? Microchip
Okay.
is cannot be tampered. I mean, if someone has to, you can't really remove a microchip. It's not like a collar or something, right? It goes in. What does a microchip contain? Basically, a microchip has just got numbers on it, right? It's just got numerical digits on it.
Okay.
How do you read it? You need to have a microchip scanner to read it, and
Mm.
it'll display that, okay, it's got this 15-digit number.
Okay.
Does this number have any other data? No, it doesn't have. It is just this, right? It is not a GPS kind of a thing. It doesn't track your animal. It
Okay.
doesn't have your vaccination details. None of that. It is just an identification into the
All right.
animal saying that Lucy is identified by this 15 digits. Right?
Okay.
Now that 15 digit is then gets connected to everything else. Now that 15 digit gets rabies vaccination, gets the THLPP, gets the deworming, the health certificate issued in this. So everything is there. So again, right, if you go backwards, it's a foolproof way of knowing that this certificate belongs to this particular pet itself. Right?
Okay.
So that is really the reason why most countries also will say that microchip has to come first, identify the animal, then you do all your vaccinations and everything, because only then can we attest that these vaccinations
You
belong
track
to
all of
this
those.
particular animal. Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
And just to add, right, and I think because I know because we get a lot of these queries about microchip and why does it. So I think one of the other important things that I feel, right, personally, I feel why microchip would be is, even though there are some countries that will be okay, some countries don't, etc., etc. See, when a pet is traveling, in airlines, and then it goes from flight to flight, etc., etc.
Mm.
See, although everything is fairly standardized, and the crates are locked, etc., etc., but just in case that for some reason, right, a pet gets out of the crate for whatever reason,
Okay.
and has been sort of, the airport authorities, whoever will get that, they don't know who that pet belongs to, right? And there's so many things. Once you
Mm.
scan the microchip, then it's easier to sort of backtrack and then find out, because most airlines will take this information of at the time of check-in or whatever. They will take all the vaccination details, etc., etc. So it's
Mm.
easier to track anything when it's something that is implanted in
Okay.
the animal, right? This has not happened. I don't mean to scare anyone here. This has not happened too often, but because it is a part, right? It's a travel process, and there have been one-off instances every once in a while. It comes to our knowing, but I know a lot of pets have been reunited just because of the microchip itself. So I feel that's a huge advantage, right? And during a time like that, that can be a very, very big advantage.
I'm sure. And it can also obviously track back the pet to the pet parent. Like if I'm traveling and it was
Absolutely.
my dog or cat that maybe chose to come out of their crate and get mixed or something, so they can track it back if they're wearing the microchip.
Right, right.
Okay.
So we don't have any, it's not, and I just want to re-emphasize, there's no GPS as such, so we cannot track that, but it is just an identification. So at least at the airport, they will scan, they will know that microchip, so then the identification is made up,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then they, like you said, right, then they track back to the pet parent.
Pet parent. Okay. All right. And what are the different options that a pet has to travel?
See, when a pet flies, right? So basically,
Hmm.
there are two main options how
Okay.
a pet can travel. One is what we call as an accompanied baggage option. So
Hmm.
accompanied baggage option is typically when a pet flies with the pet parent along with them. So the way to distinguish accompanied baggage versus something else would be that in an accompanied baggage, you will take your pet, your dog or your cat, and you will go into the airport, into the passenger terminal. You will check your pet in along with your baggage, right? And
Okay.
it's also known as excess baggage, because when you check a pet in along with you, you have to pay an excess baggage fee to the airline,
Okay.
right? So that is one. Now, in
Okay.
this itself, you have two ways of taking the pet, right? One is
Hmm.
depending on the size of the pet and the carrier and the weight restriction. Different airlines have got different thing. There are certain pets up to most airlines, right? Up to about 8 kgs of the pet plus carrier, you can take as in cabin, right? Along with you in the
Okay.
cabin.
Okay.
So it works very well for small dogs.
So the very small
Most,
breed.
yeah, very small. A lot of domestic short hair cats, right, can travel, provided, of course, they are quite comfortable in the crate and they're not meowing too much and things like that. But that is an option available. So that is
Okay.
in cabin. The second option in the same accompanied baggage option would be that they travel in the hold of the aircraft. So if they're more than 8 kgs, but and most airlines have got cutoffs, right? So some will say that you can carry a certain crate size, some will say up to a certain weight size, etc. But till that permissible limit, they will get into the hold of the aircraft. Now,
Okay.
the hold of the aircraft typically will be, again, why do we call it excess baggage? Is where you're in the hold belly of the aircraft, where your luggage and everything goes in. That's where the pets are also loaded in. However, pets are not loaded in the same space as the baggage.
The
So there is
baggage.
something called a, yeah, there's something called a pallet, which is an
Hmm.
area, and the pets are the crate. The pet with the crate are actually put in there, and so they will have that whole pallet empty, even if there is one little small cat that is traveling. So they have to keep it. So they cannot load any other luggage on that. So pets typically go in first and then come out. So they go in last, they come out first
Okay.
when the loading happens, right? So that's the accompanied baggage. So accompanied baggage, you have in cabin, and then you have your in the hold. The
Hmm.
second option would be what we call as a manifest cargo. In the manifest cargo, typically what happens is this: the pets travel irrespective of your travel, right? As a pet parent, you can go on a different flight, or you could go into the passenger terminal. Pets will get loaded into the cargo hold, right? And then the booking is separate, right? So we have something called an airway bill, and that booking happens, and then the pets are loaded. There also the pets are loaded into the hold of the aircraft itself, but from the cargo
Okay.
terminal, right? So many a times it could be that because the crate size is large and so on and so forth, a pet may not be able to travel as an accompanied baggage, but can travel on the same flight as cargo, right? it could
Okay.
it could
Hmm.
possibly be there, but it's a slightly different process. So the area where they travel is still, the belly of the aircraft is still pretty much the same. It is just that whether they do you book it as a accompanied, or you book it as a manifest cargo, right? Those are the two different options that you have.
Okay. All right. And so if I have a pet, of course, and I need to travel and I don't have a KCS certificate, or maybe it's not yet transferred to my name, in such a case, what do I need to do?
So see, as far as travel is concerned, KCI certificate or the transfer does not really matter.
Okay.
Right. So there is no bearing with KCI to travel as far as the travel is concerned. As long as we are meeting the health parameters, right? You have the health booklet, and then your name is clearly mentioned as it is in your passport, or if you're, in your family, if there are joint owners, you have to make sure that both the names are mentioned clearly there, and vaccinations and all that is there. So having a KCI certificate, not having a KCI certificate, transfer is not happened as far as purely as a travel as a personal pet is concerned, doesn't really have an impact. However, if someone is looking to, I don't know, take the pet from here and then go and register with that local club in whichever the country is, then it is
Hmm.
important, right? So then it is more to do with the KCI. You have to ensure that it is transferred in your name, and then you register. Personal pets, KCI certificate doesn't really have any impact.
Oh, all right. Okay. And what about sterilization? Is sterilization mandatory for pets that are traveling?
See, most countries will say no, right? And since we're talking about US, Canada, it's
US,
not
Canada.
mandatory. Yeah,
Hmm.
but I personally would definitely prefer that personal pets again, right? Should probably get sterilized before the travel happens, because it can be very advantageous for the pets itself. I think from a stress point of view or whatever, because you so if like say, because travel gets planned on multiple things, right? Whenever you get the bookings and you're traveling, etc., etc. If there is a female and if she comes to heat during that time, during the travel time, there's nothing much that you can do. But for her,
Hmm.
as it is, that heat can be slightly stressful, and she'll be irritable and things like that, and you put her on to the flight, and and all that, that can just add to the stress itself.
Stress
And
overall.
imagine if you have another dog that is there, and which is an unneutered, perhaps, right, on traveling on the same flight or whatever, that dog will go crazy, during that
Hmm.
time, right? Because he can sense that there is a female in heat and they are in a crate and they have to actually sit through the. So it doesn't really work out either which way. So personally, I feel that if the dogs are sterilized, I think it really makes a huge difference. So then it's a lot more easier for them. Plus, also whenever you go to the destination country, you will realize that dogs that are sterilized are given a lot more preference when it comes to boarding or when it comes to pet sitting and things like that. Until you settle into the new country, right, you will need certain services. Like you may want to leave your
Hmm.
boarding, maybe because you're in Airbnb, you're trying to figure out your house situation
Great.
or something
Yeah.
like that, right? And you don't want this being some sort of a hindrance to sorry, excuse me. You don't want this being some sort of a hindrance to not able to find a good boarding facility or a pet sitter is not taking or things like that.
Okay. And do you think one should sedate the dog for the journey?
No, no.
Not needed
Sedation
at all.
definitely not. I think there's a lot of things that keep going through about sedation and mild sedation and all that. See, sedation is only when the dog is anxious and is getting very stressed in the crate, so on and so forth, right? If you work, that comes back to point number one, which is basically if the dog or cat have got used to their crate and that's their little home, right? The anxiety level is anyway going to drop
Lesser.
considerably, right? So you don't really need to add in any medication, etc. Second is when you sedate, what happens is that there is an adverse effect with breathing with altitude, with sedation, right? So there are many airlines that will actually ask us to give a checklist and they will say, is your pet being sedated? If it is, they will actually not even accept because it puts
Okay.
a risk on the pet. So sedation, my as a relocator, I will definitely say we shouldn't. And then we actually work on the crate training. If your crate training is successful, you actually don't need to, no matter how anxious your dog or cat is, work on the crate training. As long as your dog and cat is going in and settling in there, you will not really require a sedation. And it's also not recommended. A lot of vets will also not recommend that. Airlines don't sort of recommend it.
Okay. All right. And which airlines would be pet friendly if one is traveling to the US or Canada?
See, there are a lot of pet-friendly airlines.
Hmm.
Actually, I will not say there are a lot of pet-friendly airlines. I
There
think we
aren't.
always struggle as relocators to say which is, if only wish we had more pet-friendly airlines. So if you're going to US, Canada, I think a couple of airlines that we extensively use is, of course, Lufthansa. We have KLM. We have Air France. We do, if you're going, these are all stopovers at Europe. You can do stopovers through, say, southeastern countries would typically be, we look at Singapore Airlines, we can look at Cathay. And if you're going through Middle East, then you probably may look at Emirates, and then we may probably look at Qatar Airways. And
Okay.
of course, Air India will also carry pets. So I think in some certain cities, I think you have good number of flights going out. Like from Delhi and Mumbai, you have Air India flights also flying out. So these are some of the good ones. Of course, Thai Airways, if you're looking at again Middle East. So these are some that we use fairly extensively.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I missed a couple of comments here. Shekhar says hello. Sandeep says hello,
Hi,
and lovely
Shekhar.
Stefan.
Hi,
Okay.
Sandeep.
Karan has a question. Karan says there is a cost difference between accompanied versus cargo for large dogs. Is there a cost difference?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very important question, right? So
Hmm.
when you look at cargo versus accompanied, and accompanied baggage is charged as as excess baggage. So again, different airlines have got different. Some will charge as piece concept, and some will just charge as a weight concept, whatever. However,
Okay.
that cost when compared to a manifest cargo is going to be quite a bit because manifest cargo goes on volumetric weight, right? And when you do volumetric weight, and then they do a per kg. So just to give you an example, I think a pet going to a medium-sized dog going to say a US or a Canada or accompanied baggage, most airlines will charge accompanied baggage will be something like about $400, right? So maybe 350 to $400. On the other hand, depending on which airline you go, if you're doing a cargo, can easily go up to, I think it will probably start at about a lakh, and then it can go upwards. So there is a huge cost difference between accompanied and manifest
Accompanied
cargo.
versus cargo. Okay. And so Karan again asks another question. What kind of precautions can I take to make the journey of my dog less stressful if he has separation anxiety?
Karan, I think that's one of the thing, right? And I think this has been my experience is the whole crate training, right? If you can get the dogs to get into the crate, stay in the crate, that's the first step, right? Second is if you say that he has separation anxiety, then you may want to, when he's in the crate, then you may want to sort of give him time being in the crate in a room where he cannot. So where sorry, let me complete that. So where he cannot hear or see you, but the process has to be done slowly, which is typically first of all he gets used to his crate. You guys are around, right? You're sitting watching TV, whatever, right? He's getting used to his crate. He sees you, and this is the same thing that we use with when we do separation anxiety, when we solve separation anxiety issues. Second will be that he should be able to hear you. Maybe you're in a different room or at a distance or whatever, he'll be able to hear you. Then third will be slowly when you begin a physical barrier where he cannot hear you, he cannot see you, is still in his crate. Typically, again, when you do this whole thing, you may want to do this when the dog is tired, during his sleeping time, during nights, right? So he's fed, he's had his exercise, he's fed, etc., etc., and then you sort of start. It is going to be a long. It will take a long, depending on the age of the dog. It will sometimes take a long time, but I feel it is definitely worth all the effort to put in.
Okay. And Karan has another question. Meghna, sorry, we'll just come back to yours as well. In continuation with what Karan had asked. He asked, what about Air Canada? And can a direct flight to Toronto be taken versus stoppage via Europe?
Sorry, say it again. What is Air Canada? And then can a direct flight to Toronto
Toronto
via stoppage via
versus
Europe?
stoppage via Europe.
Yeah, so Air Canada, sorry, yeah, of course, Air Canada, I missed, right? Air Canada is also pet friendly. They will also fly pets. See, direct flights mostly, and I think we need to keep in mind because of the current situation here, a lot of flights are not operating on the same aircraft that they used to, right? They've scaled down the aircrafts. I think the routing is different. They're dependent on code share and things like that. So there will be a little bit of stress on that. However, via Europe, it is pos. So when you do a via Europe, then again you look at the European airlines, right? I think you look at KLM, you look at Air France, you look at Lufthansa,
Lufthansa.
stop over at Europe, and then and then they go into Canada.
All right. Okay, and Meghna had also asked, she wanted to know when will we know more about the US restriction terms and conditions?
Meghna, actually, the US restrictions are already up on their site, the CDC website. It just came up day before yesterday. It's been put up. So the restrictions come into effect from 14th of July. So
July.
we have a window of about a month wherein the restrictions are still come to effect. But you can go to CDC, I think cdc.com, and that's a US site, and then you can check the regulations are listed over there. Most of it are already there. It's just that I think we are not completely sure of all the things, right? Because once the restrictions come in, what they say is that anybody who is only a US citizen and a resident is, and I'm saying in simple terms, right, is the one who can be allowed to take in with the permit and all that. So we don't have clarity on a student visa, work visa of other nationalities if it is considered a short visit, because short visits are not allowed. Uh, and anyway, I'm having a call with them as a part of a group that I'm a member of called the IPATA. We are having a call with the CDC folks. So if you guys have questions that you want us to clarify, you can drop it in the comments. I think I can probably collate that, and I can, and we can come back and we can list it back over here. Is that okay,
Sure.
Sonia? Can we do that?
Yeah, we can do that because once this is on the page, like after the live, also, if people have questions and they ask, we can always revert to them on those. That
Okay,
should not be a
super.
problem. Yeah. Okay, then Meghna says thank you. Welcome. Satyam has a question. He says, can a dog also travel with cargo to states or has to be accompanied only? Is it possible with any operating airline to keep a small dog weighing less than 10 kgs with crate in the cabin along with a passenger?
Okay, so Satyam, so the thing is, no, so there's no restriction that the dog has to travel uh, as accompanied only, right? So you have options. Accompanied is there and cargo is there. Actually, the restriction is more on accompanied versus on cargo. So I think most pets can figure out a way, a routing, airline for cargo option. Accompanied, we have challenges, right? So snub nose, we will have some challenges. Bigger size dogs, we will have some challenges. So accompanied, maybe there are more restrictions than with cargo. I think that answers your first part of the question. Is it possible with any operating to keep a small weight? So 10 kgs is, I don't think any airline is allowing up to 10 kgs. I think the maximum cutoff is about 8 kgs, including your weight of the pet and the carrier. And the carrier has to be a soft carrier. The ones that you actually use for cats, that's the one. That has to be the weight. And there are certain dimensions to that. Also, it cannot be a very big one. It has to fit under the seat. In cabin, it has to fit under the seat during takeoff landing. So if your dog is still meets the 8 kg but is slightly longer or taller or whatever and doesn't fit into the dimension, then still in cabin may not be an option. And then you may have to do an accompanied option.
All right. Satyam, we hope that answered your question. And okay, and is there a quarantine in the US and Canada
Canada,
for
no.
pets?
I think as far as we meet all the regulations and all, there is no. US also, there is no quarantine, but I think with US, now with the new, we are looking at an old regulation and a new regulation, right? Even as per the
Hmm.
new regulations, once you can get, I think what they set, they say that, right? If you get the rabies titer, there's a 3 month waiting, so on and so forth, and then you reach there. There is no quarantine as long as these regulations are met. And quarantine generally, when also I have to clarify, quarantine generally, most countries will say that there is no quarantine, but if a pet lands over there and they find that the pet is exhibiting any signs of sickness, right, which they feel can, in some sense, end up, I don't know, right? Maybe if they feel that this is something that needs to get checked, etc., so they will not release the pet out of the airport. So they will probably hold the pet in the airport area, and then maybe a vet will check, so on and so forth. So the quarantine is, it's actually not there. There's no mandatory quarantine, but this is something that you may want to keep in mind. Hence, we do our vet checks and all that before the travel bit as well.
Okay. And any your experience in relocating pets, any stories or something that you'd like to share?
Oh, I have a lot of stories with
This is like your journey in short, but yeah.
in my travels. Um, I have a lot of stories to share. I'm just thinking which one could be more relevant here. So I'll tell you one. So I think one of the memorable ones that we had was, and since we're talking of size and we're talking of US and all that, right? And this is, I think,
Yeah.
way back in 2000. I can't really remember. I think maybe 2012, 13 kind of a thing. So there was a Great Dane who had to be
Hmm.
moved to Charlotte in the US. I think maybe it's Charlotte, I think, in the US. And he was a huge, huge fellow. He was about, I think, about 65, 70 kgs, so on and so forth. Right. In today's scenario, I don't think we could have moved Great Dane if it not in accompanied. So we had to move it in cargo. But that time, I think we were looking at options and and all that, and I was speaking to them, and then they said that they wanted me to travel. The one that I do, the premium service that I do, they said they wanted me to travel, and I just somehow agreed to that. I said, okay, fine, we'll figure out a routing and then we'll come back. And then it was a really struggle to find a proper routing. So finally, when we found a routing, we went from here. We had a crate for the dog. We had to do a custom built wooden crate. We took the dog. I flew with the dog from here, Bangalore to Singapore, halted in Singapore. From Singapore, we got a flight to Moscow. From Moscow, we flew to Houston. And from Houston, we did a road
Wow.
trip to Charlotte. I think it was Charlotte. I can't remember, but yeah, but that was one of the. After that, I think Singapore Airlines they said we will not take such big dogs, and they cut down the crate size and everything.
Oh,
But yeah,
that seems like quite a bit of travel with
oh
him
yeah,
or
yeah,
her.
yeah, yeah. Him,
Country hopping.
yeah,
Him. So that
yeah,
is quite a bit of country
yeah,
hopping with him.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we'll maybe come back for one more story. Satyam says, okay, got it, thanks. And the same carrier we use in KLM. Any short duration flight airline that you want to suggest for a snub nose in cabin to US?
Same carrier we use in KLM. Any short duration you want to suggest for a snub nose to
The US in
snub
cabin.
nose dog to in cabin to the US? Yeah, if you meet the specification, and again, this is not current because I think current flights going into Europe and then US are not carrying in pets, so they're just doing up to Europe. But once I think the restrictions and all are done, snub nose you can carry in Lufthansa in cabin if they meet all the restrictions. KLM also will accept that they have I think certain breeds that they will not, but you can look at KLM if it's a I think pug and bull. I think a couple of those they do not take, but otherwise you can look at KLM as well. KLM Lufthansa. Lufthansa will carry. This is I think you have to make sure that it meets the specifications, right? That's the thing.
Okay. All right. Thanks. We don't have any other questions as of now. Another story, one more that you'd like to share. Something interesting.
uh, so there was another dog, right? A German Shepherd that I traveled with to a place called Gabon. This is in the interiors of Africa, basically, and they live there, right? It's basically in the forest they live, and this is community. So the dog was here in Bangalore, then had to go to Goa to stay with, or rather, meet his one side of parents, husband wife,
Okay.
right? So the dog had to meet one set of parents. So when dog went to Goa, I went to Goa, picked up the dog. I think the paternal grandparents, right? And then we flew from there to, again, he was also a big size boy. I think he was about 50 kgs or so. Then from
Wow.
Goa, we flew to Mumbai. And then he had to meet his other side parents, right? The maternal side,
Maternal.
I think. So I had to drop him at the maternal grandparents' house where they spent because he was going for 2 years or so. Then he spent some time. Night we flew from Bombay to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Then from there we flew from Ethiopia to from Addis Ababa we flew to Libreville, which is on the other side of Africa. We actually ended up staying that night in a beach resort
Wow.
because yeah, because we couldn't get any accommodation that would take a dog. So thankfully, my agent over there he booked me in a beach resort. That was a good thing. We stayed there. Then the next day we flew from there to the place called Gabon. This is on a small flight, a charter flight. We flew into that place. So it was like I said, it's really within the forest. And as we were going in, and it was light and all that, and the pet parent was driving, he said, "Do you see the shadows and all that in the background?" I said, "Yeah, what's that?" He said, "Oh, these are the elephants." And he was talking about the elephants as if they're like, like we have a streeties here. He's like, "Oh, these are my streety elephants," kind of
Wow.
thing. Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems like quite a vacation travel that you did with
yeah,
the shepherd more than having to drop him
yeah,
from
yeah,
Goa to Gabon.
yeah.
All right. All right. So, anything towards the end that you want to mention? Anything specific? We've covered
No, not
everyone's
really.
specialties. Yeah, we've spoken on
Yeah,
all the
no, I
basics at least that
think.
need to be kept in mind. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, no, no. I think that's exactly what I wanted to say, right? I think
Yeah.
basics we have really touched upon. I think it's
Yeah.
important for people to do their research. I think a lot of times when people come to us, they are in a very advanced state of moving, and they have to move very quickly in a month, in 30 days, and then things have not been done, and which then
Hmm.
puts a lot of pressure. I
Pressure.
think emotionally, also as well as financially, because then they have to leave, but has to stay in, boarding, and there's additional charges while we do all the blood work, paperwork, etc., and then send, right? If you
Yeah.
plan ahead, then you can look at better options, right? Accompanied baggage could be a very good option in many countries. It
Hmm.
works out good. The stress is less, right? So planning is really, really important. So get hold of the regulations, see what is it, look at the routing, etc., etc. Especially now because we are in such a dynamic environment, right? What is today is not really working out tomorrow, right? There's so much
Tomorrow.
change that's happening. So it's important to start and then have your plan A, plan B, plan C. We always say have multiple plans, because if one doesn't, then you're looking at other, and then not scrambling to find options.
Mm-hmm.
right? For me, that is really the biggest thing. Rest, everything I think can be managed. The crate training is something that we want to focus on because that's not in our hands, right? The
Yeah,
dog or the cat has to get adjusted. You have to give them that time to get adjusted to the crate, right? We cannot force them into it and say, okay, we are traveling and be okay with that. That won't happen.
yeah. So therefore, like a 4 months heads up always works,
Ideally,
preferably.
ideally, that's what I will say. Yeah, give or take. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then thank you everybody, and thank you Anand for being here and sharing tips on how one should plan and travel to the US or Canada with their dog or cat. And it was
Yeah.
great to have you over, and we'll maybe cover another country in one of the coming weeks or something.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sonia, for having me here. Thank you so much, Dogspot. And thank you, everybody, for joining in.
Yes. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.